Carol, have you used the neti pot before?
Oh gosh, no. I hate it though.
You need to. Have you ever tried a neti pot? It's the greatest invention ever.
It doesn't work.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't work for me.
It's a little pot, looks like a little tea kettle, but don't use it as a tea kettle because then that's very gross. And you shove it up your nose and you tilt your head and water drains out the other side and takes out all the phlegm with it.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, it's awesome. And then you blow your nose and like everything comes out. It's perfect. But you feel so much better.
Did you use it?
Yeah, like 5 times a day. Target has them. Try one. What?
Normal tea kettle, like super purpose.
No, because then when you like used a regular tea kettle, you have my snot
Well, like,
going
you can
into your
clean
tea,
it out.
and you don't want that to happen.
You
So,
can clean it out.
plus that's kind of heavy. This one's like designed for your nose. Oh, it's absolutely a very weird, but it works. You just tilt your head and it just goes. Now it's really gross when some people hold a cup and then they catch, but I don't do that. No one does that actually. Hopefully. All right. Yesterday, we were going over arguments, they come up with the TV and presidential elections. Generally, we were getting more negative consequences than positive ones, and that pretty much tended to be the trend throughout the course of the day, which was expected. That doesn't mean necessarily that you have to go that it has negative consequences on the whole. You could go that even though there's a higher quantity of negative, the quality of the positive purposes could outweigh it. Or you could certainly go with the negative viewpoint. We're not going to try to make people go one way or the other. Yesterday, though, we were placing an emphasis on coming up with your own examples, which is absolutely critical for a synthesis because you have to have ownership of the prompt. If everything that you're using with the prompt is coming directly from the source material, you don't have ownership because your ideas, your responses, your thoughts, your evidence are all dependent on the sources. So the plan with the synthesis is to kind of blend in those ideas together. One of the simple things to look over as you start working on your synthesis next week, if you were to take out all references to the sources that you use in your essay, do you still have an argument? If you still have an argument with your own examples and ideas, you probably have ownership of the prompt. If you take out all the source material and you have like a topic sentence and a conclusion, then you don't have any ownership of the prompt because all of your ideas are related to the sources. So first and foremost, come up with your own ideas. But when it comes to the source material, what I want to do today is just run through them. What do you like about the sources? What could you see yourself using from it? And the main thing that I want to try to figure out is, I think regardless of whether you're taking a positive impact of TV or a negative impact of TV on presidential elections, you could still use source A, B, C, D, E, F. And so it's just trying to come up with what are different ways in which you could use these sources. So right off the bat, source A, what do you see yourself potentially, not saying you would use it within the essay, but potentially what could be some stuff coming from source A, whether it be direct quote, whether it be ideas that you're paraphrasing, making reference to, that you could see yourself using in regards to whether TV's had a positive, negative impact on elections. Because I think my guess is probably source A and source C would probably be the most popular ones that would get used.
You can almost use it in like a rebuttal paragraph because I was specifically looking at the quotes in the second paragraph at the end.
The television one?
Yeah.
Okay.
As we grew, we lost this feeling of red contact and television has now restored it. And you could use that if you were arguing that it was negative and say that although television has restored the contact, it may not be the development that people.
Okay. And with you mentioning rebuttal paragraph, that's a good point because one of the requirements that you are going to have for your synthesis is you have to have a rebuttal paragraph. Now that doesn't hold true for all synthesis essays, but this is one, take home, you've got time to work on it, brainstorm a little bit more, prepare. So I want you to have that rebuttal paragraph in there where you are going to take an opposing viewpoint and explain the issue with it. So it's not, Olivia, just make sure I understand your point. You would use this within your rebuttal, but this would be in support of your position. You're not arguing against it.
Yeah, I'm just arguing that it's that it has restored it, but it just tweak the truth.
Mm-hmm. So that contact is there, but it hasn't really restored a positive aspect to it. Yeah, and I think that would absolutely work. If someone were going to go, TV has had a positive impact, what other quote might they take from this source? Why is TV good? Oh, because it's done this. Television, with its penetration, its wide geographic distribution and impact, provides that new direct link between Washington and the people. And within the rebuttal paragraph, if you went that route that Olivia mentioned, you could certainly even go with this idea and kind of argue against it. Sure, people will talk about TV has had a positive impact because everyone can get access to it, but just because people have access to what they are seeing on TV doesn't mean that that's good information that they are witnessing. If you're seeing bad ideas, if bad information is being spread, if it's uneducated thoughts that people are watching on TV, then no, that has not been a positive thing. So certainly this passage, which could be used in a positive way, because not even the sky is the limit, great things can happen with TV, you could certainly use it in a positive viewpoint, but you could kind of take that idea and go, hey, just because everyone has access to it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good thing. Who is Frank Stanton that's saying all of this stuff? Probably didn't really know him beforehand, but what do we know about him now, Abby?
He's the president of the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Okay, what's the Columbia Broadcasting System? CBS. It's a network. So why does it make sense that he's going to say that stuff? Of course he's going to talk about the wonderful things about TV because it's his job, so you're certainly talking about, and not saying that you'd have to bring this in, but people talk about the bias that comes up with networks and whatnot. Yesterday, that was the main point. Well, his viewpoint's certainly going to be biased. It's his job. And it's something simple to go Columbia Broadcasting System, and I'm not judging you or saying raise your hand if you knew it or didn't, but that's a detail that I think a lot of people kind of skip over, not recognizing Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS. Oh. But it's a little detail that can kind of help understand where that viewpoint would be coming from. So if you were even to make reference to, TV executives are of course going to try to identify positive things about their networks and how TV operates, but they're not going to acknowledge the negative bias that is there. I could still put source A because I've just referenced something that Frank Stanton said. Biased viewpoint about the positive aspect of TV. So I don't have to use a direct quote from the source in order for it to still work. I can still paraphrase some of those ideas and whatnot that are coming from it, but simple little details like Columbia Broadcasting System, can be a nice little detail for you to work into the course of the essay. But this is a nice one source because it gives some general ideas that certainly can get used regardless of the position that you're ultimately going to take. Any other ideas with source A? I'd say it's usually those first two paragraphs that most people take a look at. You certainly do get reference then to Kennedy-Nixon debates, which we're certainly going to have some reference to later on. Large segments of the public have been given a new immediate contact with political events. Television has appeared to be fulfilling its early promise. One of the interesting things with this, and this kind of lead into source B, what's one of the complaints about source B when it comes to politicians and the way that we view them? I know I still have source A up here, but what's a viewpoint that kind of comes across in source B so far as a criticism of politicians and how we look at them into today's world? Okay. Which I think is what, number 1. Yeah. Nice thing about source B, and there does tend to at least be one source that does this, and it might not be in bullet form, but where you see 1, 2, 3, you usually will get a source that kind of gives you some ideas, some bullet points, some guidelines that you can try to help kind of set up your ideas about the effect of TV or whatever the topic is. In case he didn't have any before, this will usually kind of help with some things. Because of television's celebrity system, presidents are losing their distinctiveness as social actors and hence are often judged by standards formerly used to assess rock singers and movie stars, celebrities. Do you agree with that? That we judge presidents differently now than we probably used to? 4 years ago. Okay, so let's say when we had our last presidential election. 4 years ago, if we said Donald Trump's name, what would you think of? The Apprentice? TV show? Anything else? And that's probably, I would think, would be the most common response to it. You know, celebrity TV star, reality, or not celebrity TV, reality TV. Certainly people would know him from before, you know, with other things going on. But yeah, I mean, we certainly look at him, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, not as a politician, not as potential presidential candidate, let alone president-elect, but as a TV star. So certainly now that he is president-elect, I don't think that viewpoint's automatically going to shift now to political figure. We certainly recognize that, but still kind of judge that celebrity system. When would you say that transition started to happen? Not for Trump specifically, but presidents or presidential candidates in general. When did they go from being politicians to semi-politicians, semi-celebrities? When did they start to lose that distinctiveness of being a political figure? That's a big question. I'm not looking for a specific answer. When would you say that shift kind of started to go from, when that's the president, that's the leader of the free world, to he's president, it's like a celebrity? Reagan? How come?
Because he was like involved in Hollywood before, so he was all big about being in front of cameras and using that to his advantage.
Okay, so certainly would be a president who was maybe more comfortable in front of the camera, as opposed to maybe Richard Nixon, or at least with that 1960 example with the debate, being in front of the camera and not going so well. Now there's more reasons behind it than just what his comfort would be. But okay, we got Reagan. Certainly having a Hollywood career. Close friends with Walt Disney in the 1950s. Anybody else? Who's the source guy? Well,
I guess like when you started like televising debates and stuff like that, like with like the Kennedy and Nixon example, I think I read somewhere that like Kennedy had taken classes before like about like how to act in front of the camera. And it was more like an acting class as opposed to like actually like talking about real issues, which is kind of like the point that the prompt is.
sure, and it's okay that we end up doing cross-source here with C coming in. I mean, it's a whole different thing to be viewed as opposed to simply, you know, not necessarily read something, but state something. The way that you do deliver it is certainly going to be volume, pace, but also looking comfortable or uncomfortable. You know, if you're in a speech class and you're white knuckling the podium, you know, squeezing it harder than anything else, people are going to notice that. And yes, they'll still listen to your ideas, but you're also going to notice when they really don't look very comfortable up there. And if they don't look comfortable, then that confidence you're not going to recognize nearly as much. Where if you're listening to something on the radio, they could be in sweatpants, feet up on the counter, reclining back, probably not the case, but you wouldn't know it if you don't see it. And what's something, and Reagan and Kennedy would certainly have a very contrasting aspect about them. Reagan, as a president, was fairly, compared to Kennedy, trying to think of a way without giving the answer. I mean, what would be one aspect that would make Kennedy somewhat of a superstar as well, with the TV camera? He was very young. Reagan was rather old by the time he became president. So certainly as you're dealing with younger presidents, what's something that you start to maybe feel towards them if they are younger and not old, there might be a little bit more familiarity starting to take place where you can relate to them a little bit. So that would certainly be an issue. But you take a look at what we're looking at down here with source A. Large segments of the public have been given a new immediate contact with political events. It has appeared to be fulfilling its early promise. That could be a statement that you could defend or refute, where its early promise is it's going to give you that direct link between Washington and the people. Yeah, now that I see people and I'm able to judge them better, I do feel more connected. Or you could take that viewpoint that, that direct link really is not there, because as Carol said, maybe I'm not really focusing on the parts that I necessarily should. Which president gets mentioned quite a bit in source B? You have Clinton. Clinton, like Kennedy, fairly young when he gets elected to be president. Clinton is going on the talk shows, playing the saxophone, wearing his sunglasses. I think Clinton was showing us that clip in the argumentation at one time. One of the things that I remember when Clinton was president, his weight was always a subject of controversy a little bit. He's much thinner now than he was when he was president. So he would be going on these jogging, excursions all throughout D.C. Secret Service agents going to be around him and people jogging. You don't see that nearly as much anymore, with security issues and whatnot. But it wouldn't be uncommon, halfway through the jog, where does he stop? Golden Arches, goes to McDonald's, gets a coffee, hash brown, shaking hands with everybody. People loved it. It's the President of the United States, and he's getting a Big Mac and fries just like me. And so certainly you do have that relatability taking place where it loses that distinctiveness as you have to be someone different, special to become president. But at the same time, does that rock star mentality take away from the prestige of the office and the impact that it should have? But hey, if you're dealing with younger generations, you get MTV generation here, that could certainly be an important vehicle that could get utilized. What else do you think about source B? Could use.
Even just going on yesterday, how saying how it was it was Saturday Night Live idea. A lot of celebrities do go on there, so that can transfer back to wanting to use that as an example.
I mean, you have to publicize your brand, so to speak, where it does get to the point that if you don't show up on the talk shows or Saturday Night Live, that there's large segments of the population that you are discounting, and they might not, vote for you. And even something as simply to look at a past election, where now, everyone's going hindsight's 2020, where people were expecting Clinton to win. Well, she didn't visit these states. Wisconsin gets mentioned quite a bit. She lost Wisconsin. Maybe she should have visited that state. And even though that's not a TV issue, if you don't touch or reach out to certain groups of people, they might ignore you. TV is a way to do that because you cannot physically go to every single place. So yeah, making that circuit on the talk shows, Saturday Night Live, Comedy Central, doing interviews, with Colbert or whomever the case may be, absolutely, that could be a valid point. Does it go too far? Well, I mean, if you do end up having the conversation about boxers versus briefs, you might think that it does. I still remember when that happened. Lady asked a question. I have one other question. And then she threw that one out there. I don't think anyone's going to be asking for my question. So if you are in favor of the impact of TV, what's a big thing that you can take from this? Allows for connection. If you're not in favor of the impact of TV, what has it done to the political offices? Basically has dumbed it down to just being celebrity popularity contest as opposed to anything else. Source C, mentioned A gets used quite a bit generally when this one has been done as an essay assignment before. C also gets used quite a bit as well. The big concern that I have if people go with source C, because it's a great source, It's just make sure that you don't put all your eggs in that one basket and summarize the source and keep going back to Nixon Kennedy. What are connections that you can make beyond Nixon and Kennedy, and how that would still relate, in the current world with politics and impact of TV. Certainly, the image over content idea gets brought up quite a bit with this, having the fuzzed appearance when it comes to Nixon, and a very crisp appearance for Kennedy. The whole idea about whether victory was because people were watching it, the triumph of image over content compared to people who were listening to it on the radio. Other than those aspects, and they're very important ones, anything else that you could see yourself pulling from this source C that could still be useful information, again, regardless of whether you're going in favor or against. Or is it pretty much an image versus content source and it doesn't really go beyond that? Can you think of any impacts with debates that you have seen where if you weren't watching it, maybe it would be perceived differently? You know who Dan Quayle is? Just one of the moments when I started to feel old. Dan Quayle was the older George Bush's vice president. Dan Quayle, younger, he was senator. Dan Quayle had a little bit of a fub when he was going to schools and doing the whole, hey, shaking hands, kissing babies kinds of things. He was helping out with a spelling bee. And the word was potato, and the kid spelled the word, and he's like, no, you didn't spell it properly. But the kid did. So everyone made fun of Dan Quayle not being able to spell the word potato for the rest of his life. And probably that's still going on. Do you know Wayne's World? Did you say yeah? Carol, who said yeah? You did? Okay, good, thank you. No Garth, the blonde one? Dana Carvey, who's Saturday Night Live, he always portrayed Dan Quayle when he would do the skits. He would do George Bush, but he'd be Dan Quayle as well. He would always dress up in a suit that was like 2 sizes too big, and he would walk around like a little kid, because kids just thought, that people thought that Quayle was a nitwit. The one speech that they were doing, they had a hydraulic, so he'd go to the podium, and then he'd hit this button, and he would raise up so he would look older and whatnot. So the way that he portrayed himself visually during debates and whatnot usually did not go very well for him. People just thought he was a kid, wasn't educated enough. For the presidential primaries this year, Republican debate, I think the first Republican debate was in Cleveland. And they did it in 2 rounds. There was the main event debate that was live on TV. And if Lexi wanted to go to or Carol wanted to go to, you could buy tickets and attend the debate. There also was like the minor debate that took beforehand. So you have Trump, Rubio, Ted Cruz, all these people doing the main debate. And then the lesser known Republican candidates did like a pre-debate. So Rick Santorum, who used to be senator from Pennsylvania, was one of them and all that kind of stuff. If you were videotaping a debate, how would you expect the camera angle to look? Like, how would you be shooting the debate? What would you want to focus on if you're in charge of the camera? Silly question, I know. Who's talking? The candidates? Pretty much like, as I'm looking at you now, Ray, like straight on, okay? And that's what they did for the main debate. But when they did the sub-debate, they did some head-on shots, but they also did some shots like this, where Helene is talking, and I'm going to look at her from a side profile. I still see her talking, but if she's in an arena, what do I see behind her? Because if I'm doing a straight-on headshot, I just see the stage. But if I'm at the side, I see her face and what would be over this way in an arena. You would hope. It wasn't people, they were empty seats.
Oh.
And then they also did some shots from kind of behind. So I'd be kind of behind Matt talking, and what do I see in front of him? Empty seats. What's the message? No, yeah, you can talk, but nobody's listening because nobody's there because we didn't really let them go. So in some ways, it was almost like the network and really the National Republican Party kind of set up the debate. These people's ideas don't matter. Focus on the next ones who are going to come up. So, and that's a very specific issue that, unless you were watching it or seeing it, you'd have no idea about. But certainly the impact of how TV can shape people's viewpoints. It could be the visual of the person themselves, what they're wearing, age, how they look, but it can be something as simple, too, as the camera angles that are getting taken or whatnot. And certainly, when it comes to camera, you can view people in certain ways that are going to make them look taller, shorter, stronger posture, maybe not quite as strong. So there are certainly ways that things can be manipulated. But the whole idea is that you take the ideas that are present in the source, but then you can apply it to other examples. The chart that we have. First off, can anyone pick up a problem with the information? There's 2 typos on here, which I don't think were done on purpose, but I want to call out attention to them. And it deals more with the source information in the text box up at the top. In relation to the chart.
The box that goes through and not goes through 96.
Okay, so this says 92. Down at the bottom it says 96, and then
It says the research was done in 1994.
the copyright, 94, and it still goes to 96. As far as I know, that is total accidental typo on College Board released the chart. But I want to draw attention to it because there's been instances before where people will take note of it, which is good. You're reading with a close eye. That does not devalue the source. Any source that would show up on a synthesis prompt essay, all the sources are equally valid. So there's not going to be the, Jordan, you picked the wrong source, you have to subtract 3 points from your score now. As long as the sources are used properly, you're not quoting it out of context or anything like that, it is still a perfectly valid source. So that's just an issue where a typo kind of took up. You don't have to worry about going, well, this one says it's from a book, this one says it's from an online blog. I wonder if it's therefore not as good of a source. If it's showing up on the prompt, you can use it and you don't have to worry about the quote-unquote credibility of it. Anything interesting with the chart? Information-wise?
Pretty much ABC, CBS, NBC.
Which makes sense, because you kind of think of those as being the main networks. As you get into 1996, now you got Fox, CNN, 92, CNN starts to show up. Any reasons for that? Besides being news stations. Why would there only be those 3 networks carrying the debate in 1960? There's probably only 3, maybe throw PBS into the foray at that point. But in 1960, you turned on the TV, whatever channel you were tuning into on September the 26th, you were probably watching Nixon and Kennedy. Come 1996, you had these options, but if you didn't want to watch the debate, but you wanted to watch TV, what could you do? Change the channel. Go to ESPN, HBO, Discovery. Watch House Hunters on HGTV, whatever show you want, SpongeBob on cartoon. Yeah, we watch SpongeBob. I see him being SpongeBob, yeah. Best cartoon ever growing up? That would be a smart debate. I'm thinking Dragon Tales. Dragon Tales was a big
Oh, I
cartoon.
remember Dragon Tales.
Franklin, that turtle. Dumb turtle. Dumb turtle.
Blues Clues.
What happened to the ratings over time? They tend to drop. Makes sense. They're going to be highest in 1960, new thing, but they drop as time goes on. Now, one thing though that Matt was just kind of mentioning, you turn on the TV in 1960, you probably have 3 channels. So why will the ratings be higher in 1960? Fewer options. Ooh, TV, let's watch it. Hey, they're talking. We'll watch it. 1992, 1996, I don't want to watch this. You have the options to watch something else. So that certainly could kind of be part of the issue that's going on. even though the ratings are going down, the viewership, 46.1 million people at that point, that's still a large segment of the population. So certainly you could still have the benefit of this where it is still reaching out to lots of people, even if it might not be the same ratings that they were getting initially. But you could take a look at, hey, has TV really kind of lost its effect somewhat over the course of the year? Probably, because you're looking at 36 years down the road from when that very first one took place. How many people in here watched presidential debate? Who's one of them? I was going to say, how many people watched the whole entire presidential debate? Good job, Ray. Why'd you tune out after 5 minutes? What could you do, depending on TV services that you have, but you could be having debate, Penguin game, you could record it, DVR it. How many people actually watch live TV? That number's kind of getting smaller and smaller. You could be watching something else, you're seeing what's going on Twitter, statement comes up, you switch back over, you rewind, you could watch the whole thing over again. Or some people aren't going to watch the debate, but you know when the debate's over, what are you going to see? News about it, the highlights about it, and you take a look at Source F, and Ted Koppel even mentions this, what's going to happen when it comes to showing what took place on a debate. If I can make it large enough for you to actually see it. We're not going to show you the whole debate. We're going to show you why are they only going to show you the best parts. And I'm kind of going back to what we were talking about yesterday, purpose of networks. Why do they show what they tend to show? Because they're worried about ratings, viewership, money. So when it comes to presidential debates, has it maybe lost some impact, some effect? Certainly it could be if you're looking at it from a financial perspective. Now you could certainly go, hey, there's still a benefit that you weren't able to watch everything and you can still see the main points that are going on, but you can certainly have sources working in conjunction with one another, and you can certainly, whether you're going affirmative or negative on an idea, still use all those sources to help. Make sure you submit journals tonight if you haven't already done so.